Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before we begin this meeting, I ask that everyone silence your cell phones. The, excuse me. The Fort Bend ISD Board of Trustees is an open meeting for the public to observe the board conducting district business. Therefore, audience members may address the board during the designated audience items section on the agenda. If you have any printed materials you want to give to the board members, you must provide them to the board secretary, Jane Kaiser, or to me, and we'll provide them to the board. We also ask the members of the audience be respectful of others, remain quiet during the meeting so that everyone is able to hear the proceedings. For your convenience, microphones have been provided on both sides of the boardroom. Please speak directly into the microphones if you're asked to answer a question or address the board during the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Officer Ontiveros. The time is 6:02 p.m. This meeting is hereby called to order. We have the presence of a quorum. The meeting has been duly called, and notice of the meeting has been posted for the time and manner required by law. Please stand for the pledges of allegiance and remain standing for a silent invocation.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the Texas, one state under God, one indivisible.
Please remain standing for a silent invocation. Thank you. You may be seated. Next up this evening is recognitions. Dr. Dupree.
Yes, ma'am. It's always a good day when we can celebrate the successes of our students and staff. So if the board would join me in front of the dais, we will recognize a few students this evening.
Good evening, Madam President, Dr. Dupree, members of the board. We're very excited this evening to recognize two 7th grade honor roll students from Crockett Middle School who led us in the pledge. Can we please have Vicente Echeverri Montoya come forward, please? Vicente is enrolled in pre-AP classes while being a student athlete and an orchestra. We also have Miss Liliana Hill. Ms. Hill serves as the president of the Junior Thespian Club and also a student athlete. She's an active volunteer around her campus and was very instrumental in Hurricane Harvey, helping at Grand Mission Clubhouse with their community drive. Thank you both for being here. And if we have anyone from Crockett Middle School supporting them, if you'll please stand for a round of applause as well. Thank you for all you do for our students. Now I'd like to introduce Miss Wendy Carlisle from Commonwealth Elementary, who is our physical education teacher. If you'll please join us. Ms. Carlisle was instrumental in the 2017 Let's Move Active Schools National Award Program. This award promotes physical activity and exercise by creating an active school culture and provides students with at least 60 minutes of physical activity. Thank you very much for all you do for our students. We also had another outstanding school participate in this program, Ridgemont Elementary, and if we could have Miss Stephanie Houston come forward on behalf of her physical education teachers. Thank you, Miss Houston. The PE teachers at Ridgemont are Jessica Edwards and Shannon Bandish-Nash. Let's give them a round of applause. I couldn't be here this evening. Thank you and congratulations. Dr. Dupree, that's all the recognition for this evening.
Next up this evening are our audience items. We will start this evening with Mr. Reginald Moore. Mr. Moore, if you will just make sure that microphone is on. Mr. Burdine is you'll have 3 minutes to speak, and Mr. Burdine is gonna keep time for you, and he will let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining.
Okay, my name is Reginald Moore, as you know, well known. I'd like to apologize last week for not standing up to the flag, and I'd like to apologize to the kids or whoever was offended by that. But here's the reasons why. I'm representative of the Convict Lease Cemetery here, and Article 13 came out. You're free unless convicted of a crime. Texas used to turn the plantations into prisons. It all started on the site where they're building a technical center. I'm trying to get a museum and recognition from these guys. I've been working for a long time trying to do that with the city, the state, and the county. Here's why. Integral to cotton farming was slavery, which Austin encouraged by granting settlers the Austin 380 acres of extra land for each slave they brought with them. Okay. Matthew Samuel Nathan Williams started one of the first plantations in Texas on property in what is now Sugar Land that had been granted to their family by Stephen F. Austin himself. Okay, and also here's another excerpt from a paper called The Hellhole on the Brazos. By 1882, more than 1/3 of the state's inmates, roughly 800 prisoners, worked on 12 sugar plantations through the Ellis and Cunningham contract. The Cunningham and Ellis properties had a workforce of over more than 500 prisoners at one time. Okay, this here one camp was on the railroad and another on the Brazos River, both outside the study area. The third, however, was just south of US 90A and the railroad in the north portion of the study area on the Ellis Plantation. The plantation in Fort Bend County was described as low mosquito-infested swamps and sluggish bayous were habitats for alligators and nuisance creepers. Convicts labored bare-legged in wet sugarcane fields, dying like flies in the periodic epidemics of fever. Civilian labor could not be kept on the place. In those days, a free man who stayed more than 2 weeks was suspected of hiding out from the sin of commission and omission. Convict laborers in these camps were provided with minimal housing at best. Wood barracks were luxurious compared to sleeping under the buildings in abandoned slave dwellings. Shacks are simply out in the sugarcane fields. Brutality by guards were not acceptable to the state authorities, was rampant at the various work camps. Sickness, disease, and lack of medical treatment led to an annual mortality rate of 3%, showing their contempt. Convict lease prisoners dubbed the plantation the hellhole on the Brazos, a descriptor that stuck with the property well into the 20th century. Okay, this here is an article that came out of Texas.
30 seconds.
And also this article that's a snippet called Hellhole on the Brazos. So I'm asking that Fort Bend County on this site, which is primary site, well, also Lead Belly on the plantation house that was there, sung a song to get itself out of freedom. There's a lot of archaeological studies that didn't get done and that are being done right now from the enforcement of the Historic Commission. So I'm asking for a museum to be put inside the technical building.
Time.
So that we can make this history be a part of the true history of Fort Bend County, the state, and Sugar Land. So I appreciate if we could be a part and have a museum there, and you guys to give recognition to that, Mr. Dupree.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Thank you for being here. Next up is Mr. Rodrigo Carrion.
Good evening, Board. My name is Rodrigo Carrion. Come to speak relating item 11E, relates to our safety skills and language for our students. And one advantage and a blessing that I saw happen this earlier last month, or there was a National Voting Registration Day, which I saw in the media and saw Fort Bend ISD participate in other school districts in the state of Texas, and hopefully nationally to get involved for to make the right decisions, and especially like this one coming up November 7. I would like everybody in school board to oppose this Fort Bend mobility bond. This mobility bond is going to affect safety nets, which we're talking about right here, opening a new road, private property of the landfill, Blue Ridge landfill from 518 to Lake Olympia Boulevard. That's going to affect our three schools, Rosa Park Elementary, versus Willow Ridge, and Lake Olympia Middle School. By what? More big old traffic, trash trucks, and more foul order coming from the landfill that needs to be closed before the road ever is open there using our public money on private property. They can pay their own road if they want to, but the county's making the wrong error and affecting our community and our schools, school zones. And also, very important for the schools, our schools to hand out these constitutional booklets to our students, at least in high school, that way they'll know their right, First Amendment right. First Amendment right, which lawmakers even think is under attack. No, it's not under attack. It's just being misled and misrepresentative and misusing it, mishandling it. Now we're going to need to handle it properly and wisely for everybody to know and use their voice. Just like I say, it's our language there. And for our freedom of speech and our voting rights to be improved. And that's the reason we need to take advantage and elect new lawmakers, because our lawmakers we've been seeing are not willing to support our schools, our school district fundings and all that. So we need more leadership. That way our schools will come to a rise and not be left behind, and our students. So it's very important that we take this seriously to improve our education and our topics. And that's why I believe, like right now, we're under Samuel chapter 8 of the Bible, stating people want a king. Well, they got a king, but every 4 years, which is a president. Now we need a king every day. That's why it matters that we be involved and make sure everybody's treated fairly and equally, and for justice to come for all.
30 seconds.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carrion. Thank you for being here. Is Prakash Rangan here? Prakash? Okay. All right. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here this evening. Next up are our information items. And first, we will start with our individual student planning update. Dr. Dupree.
Yes, Madam President. The board has expressed a great deal of interest in our student planning over the last few years, and so we've asked staff to provide an update on how we're engaging students in planning for their future in Fort Bend ISD and beyond. So we're going to ask Deanna Saavedra, our Chief Academic Officer, to introduce the report, and then she'll introduce members of her team presenting this evening. Deanna?
All right, good evening, Madam President, members of the board, and Dr. Dupree. We are pleased to share with you an update associated with individual student planning. Tonight's planning update is going to be presented with first, how is the plan anchored in the work that we've done with Profile of a Graduate, with the district goals, and best practices associated with counseling. In addition, we're going to share some history in terms of where we've been with individual student planning, where we're going, and our current reality, and then where we're going in terms of next steps for our individual student planning. I'd like to introduce our Executive Director, Mr. Troy Byrne, who's going to share with us all of the specifics associated with the plan, and then we'll entertain questions when he's gone through the presentation. Troy?
Thank you, Ms. Saavedra. Good evening, Madam President, board members, Dr. Dupree. Thank you for allowing us to present the individual student planning update this evening. Tonight's report will focus on systems and protocols. Am I on now? Tonight's report will focus on systems and protocols that will support students in creating a personalized, actionable graduation plan that will equip and inspire them for futures beyond what they can imagine. As we look at the board-adopted Profile of a Graduate qualities that Fort Bend ISD students should have upon graduating from our district, individual student planning specifically addresses how we can equip students with skills for life to exhibit determination, engage in healthy life choices, and prepare and apply knowledge in productive ways for their future. Additionally, individual student planning creates graduates who are lifelong learners, graduates who approach life with wonder and curiosity, seek opportunities to be creative, possess a thirst for knowledge, and are academically prepared for future choices. Individual student planning also aligns with all 4 district goals, providing an equitable learning environment to all students, ensuring that students own and are responsible for their own learning, behavior and progress, and an inclusive, collaborative, and fluid learning environment with opportunities for both risk-taking and success while developing students' social, emotional, academic, literacy, language, and life skills. The National ASCA model, designed by the American School Counselor Association, empowers school counselors with the knowledge, skills, and resources to promote student success in the school, the home, the community, and the world. If we look at the convergence of these three sources, we can define the product of the individual student planning plan that we will propose tonight. Each student will have a student-created, actionable, personalized plan for post-secondary success based on their student strengths, their student interests, personal goals, and future plans. A comprehensive school counseling program is an integral component of the school's academic mission. The purpose of the ASCA national model is to do more school counseling while keeping the process simple and focused on student data. The model is comprised of 4 components, as we see right here. The foundation component encompasses the mission, the belief system, the philosophy of counselors. It also defines the ASCA content standards, student competencies, and professional competencies. The management component that we see there on the left houses the tools for implementation such as counselor principal agreements, the guidance calendar system, and how counselors should use data with the advisory council. The delivery component is where individual student planning resides, along with guidance curriculum, responsive services, and system support. And finally, the 4th component is accountability, which defines counselor performance standards and evaluation and improvement strategies based on data reports. By using this model, counselors prioritize their work to spend the majority of their time with direct services to students. Although all 4 dimensions are important with the ASCA model, tonight we will be discussing the delivery component to address individual student planning. The district has seen considerable progress in individual student planning since 2013. In 2013, the state of Texas, through the Texas legislation, approved House Bill 5. In the summer of 2013, introduced 5 focus endorsements, each with course pathways designed to best prepare students for post-secondary success. The 2020 Vision College and Career Readiness Plan was approved by the board in 2013. Through that, the district created college and career centers staffed with college and career readiness advisors. The district adopted the ASCA model in 2014, addressing gaps in individual planning as the 5 endorsements were further built out to address House Bill 5 graduation requirements. In 2014, a guidance task force developed the Fort Bend ISD Developmental Guidance and Counseling Program to align with the ASCA model, with implementation in 2015. The program outlined common guidance lessons, counseling program expectations, the counselor principal agreement, a district counselor calendar, and align the counselor job descriptions and counselor evaluations to the ASCA model. The district sought out an online platform to assist counselors and students with individual planning. The platform needed to provide equitable access to college, career, and course planning tools, store electronic 4-year plans, allow district staff to monitor and access data associated with those plans and applications and scholarships, and provide a communication platform between counselors, students, and parents regarding scholarship opportunities and college opportunities. The district has seen positive data trends that correlate to the increased focus of individual student planning. In the 2016-17 school year alone, counselors reported approximately 21,000 student meetings at the elementary level and approximately 89,000 student meetings at the secondary level. Student data also showed that advanced studies increased with students. Middle school pre-AP enrollment increased by 10.6%. We had a 5% increase of students taking advanced placement tests. Dual credit alone, enrollment in dual credit increased by 186%. Students completing career and technical education, coherent sequence of courses, also increased by 19%. And 90% of our 8th graders had an individual plan that resided within Naviance. In addition, counselors conducted junior conferences with all students. Our guidance curriculum continued to be built out. Counselor job descriptions and performance evaluations did align with the ASCA model. Although counselors have had a large number of meetings with students, there has been no means to identify the subject or quality of those meetings. Therefore, we're looking at the planning protocols that counselors are using with our students as they meet for conferences. We are also missing planning activities at different grade levels. We had 4-year planning residing in 2 platforms, both Skyward and Naviance. Strategic and focus PD and awareness happened for counselors, however, it did not occur around the ASCA model. And we had inconsistent practices across the district with these student protocols. The Department of Counseling and Post-Secondary Readiness created these 4 individual planning corrective actions based on evaluating current practices, individual student planning data, and audits from these programs. Number 1, for the corrective action, we will improve the individual planning protocols and timelines that exist right now. The second corrective action is to expand activities to engage all students from grades 6 through 12, making sure that there's a vertical alignment starting in the 6th grade that builds on student strengths and build on student interests, that they are exploring college and career ideas early in middle school, and then building that up through high school. The third corrective action is to increase training opportunities for counselors and administrators around the ASCA model, individual planning tools, and the use of individual student planning forms. And finally, number 4, we need to promote awareness and knowledge of the individual planning tools to parents, to students, to teachers, and administration. As we look at those corrective actions, we will roll this out in 3 phases. The current year is phase 1. Individual planning activities have been created already, and they are being implemented this school year. Counselors have been trained best practices for individual planning conferences. We're rolling out a parent university this year. November is our first parent university, and then we have another one in December. We will also begin meeting with 11th and 12th graders. So as you heard in the report earlier, we met with 11th graders this past year. We're going to increase that to seniors this year, shooting for a goal of 90%. And then we have some campuses that are piloting 8th and 9th grade meetings with students this school year. For phase 2, 2018 and 19, we will be meeting with all 11th and 12th graders through student planning. We will be meeting with all 8th and 9th graders with a goal of 90% or better. And then we will be meeting with piloted 10th graders who need assistance based on student data from middle school and 9th grade. As you can see here, we increased the junior level from 90% to 100%, and we are increasing the pilot for 8th and 9th grade to 90% across the district. The pilot will guide us this year with any issues that we may be seeing so that we can best build out the 8th and 9th grade next year. And then finally in 2019-20, we want to meet with 8th, 9th, 10th, all of the targeted 10th, 11th and 12th graders at 100%. We want to do a slow build out so that we can collect data at each grade level to measure how much time counselors do spend with students and what is the quality of those conferences through the conference forums. The Department of Counseling and Post-Secondary Readiness also created individual student planning activities to take place from 6th through 12th grade. As you see here on this slide, we have samples of activities that are taking place across the district. We couldn't list all of them in here. You can see that we have a transition survey at the 6th grade and 9th grade that allows students transitioning from elementary to middle school to share any issues that they're having with their counselors. And then 9th grade, we also have a transition survey coming into the high schools so that students can share issues that they may be having at the high school level. We've also increased the college search from 11th grade down to sophomore level at the 10th grade. And we're good on that. We have some training opportunities that are taking place this year. We have in-person Fort Bend training for all new users of Naviance and the individual planning tools. We are creating on-demand video training modules through the Department of Counseling and Post-Secondary Readiness. We also have training modules that occur through Naviance and through Skyward. We're developing courses for planning tools in Schoology for our counselors to use, and students as well. And then we're providing focused training on the ASCA model to all counselors and administrators to ensure that there is a collaboration between counseling staff and administrative staff. Indirect services are provided on behalf of students as a result of the school counselor's interactions with others, including consultation and collaboration with our parents. A portion of our Fort Bend ISD parents are well aware of how to apply for colleges, how to apply for scholarships, what an SAT means and what an ACT means, and the importance of advanced coursework. However, we have some parents who do not have that knowledge or that awareness. So we are creating the parent universities to ensure that all Fort Bend ISD parents can guide their children towards college and career readiness. The district will hold several parent nights to focus on college readiness, Texas endorsements, classes available to students, the importance of advanced courses, and the importance of CTE certifications. The district has already hosted 2 college nights. 2 parent university nights will occur in November and December. Counselors will also be provided tools and activities to use during campus events, such as parent-teacher nights. The district will continue to capitalize on community events to increase college and career readiness. Administrators will also be trained on the ASCA model, particularly the principal-counselor agreement, the counseling calendar, and student data points that may be monitored and assessed. The management component of the ASCA model focuses on principals and counselors working together to ensure that students are being served accordingly. At the beginning of the year, principals and counselors co-create the principal-counselor agreement, a document outlining the amount of time counselors will spend on direct and indirect services to students. The team also reviews the counselor calendar, ensuring that student individual planning activities and guidance lessons take place in a timely manner. Although much progress has occurred under the Guidance Task Force, the ASCA Task Force will further develop the counselors' work around the ASCA model. Currently under development, the ASCA Task Force will be comprised of a diverse group of stakeholders, similar to the makeup of the GT Task Force and Special Education Task Force. Work around individual planning is firmly anchored in the profile of a graduate, addressing how we equip students with skills for life, engage in smart life choices, and prepare and apply knowledge in productive ways for the future. Additionally, individual student planning creates graduates who are lifelong learners, graduates who approach life with wonder and curiosity, seek opportunities, possess a thirst for knowledge, and are academically prepared for future choices. Further details about the profile of a graduate implementation will be shared in the November board meeting. This is called a cliffhanger. To summarize our next steps, in order to complete these tasks, the Department of College and Post-Secondary Readiness will reinstate the Guidance Task Force, renaming the working group to the ASCA Task Force. Work will center on the national ASCA model, individual student planning activities, reviewing current data and progress of campuses, and evaluating timelines to ensure an alignment of processes. The Department of Counseling and Post-Secondary Readiness, along with counselors, will assist with the development of the profile grade level standards. In 2018-19, the plan will be implemented by all campuses, with continuation of district ASCA training. Full implementation of the ASCA model will take place in 2019-20. These corrective action measures are designed around best practices to create a vertically aligned, scalable process so that each student will have a student-created, actionable, personalized plan for post-secondary success based on student strengths, student interests, personal goals, and future plans. Madam President, board members, Dr. Dupree, thank you for allowing me to present this evening. I will take questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. We appreciate you being here, and thanks for presenting all of this good information for us. I'm sure we have questions or comments from the board members. Ms. Helliger.
Yes, thank you so much for your presentation. And I wanted to also say that I enjoyed having sharing the table with you last week at Quail Valley Middle School during our board tour. And I know you and I had a discussion around some things that I've been hearing in the community around dual language programs and those kinds of things. And I think you're going to go back and take a look into that, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So I wanted to just, this sounds like we've got a good implementation plan, but This is my third year on the board. I was just sharing this with Kristen. One of the things that I had a challenge with last time when we talked about um, um, career readiness and is how we tie that back into our CTE programs, because I struggled with this the last time, and so I'm struggling with it a little bit today, especially because we're stating this is the individual student plan. And so I heard a lot of conversation around college readiness, which is great. I think this is a good plan where we're getting people introduced to college early on, and then helping support the parents within this particular process. But for the kids that, you know, they're not quite sure that they want to do college yet, but their parent or somebody that they know is more of a hands-on person, and they know that they want to take on the parents' business or want to do something different. How does that fit into this current plan? And if you could share that with me.
Yes, ma'am. It fits well with this plan. Starting in sixth grade, the students will learn about the 5 endorsements that Texas offers. With those endorsements, there's several pathways that students can take. Some of them are college pathways, which focus on dual credit or advanced placement. But many of the pathways focus on on CTE classes. And with those CTE classes, what we want to do is make sure that they follow a coherent sequence of courses. As they follow those coherent sequence of courses through those pathways, their final culminating class usually has one or more certifications that they can challenge. And if they do pass that certification, they can walk out of high school with certifications and be job ready as they walk across the stage. So part of what we implement through student planning is not only college readiness, but true post-secondary readiness. We want to offer students a choice. If we provide the right opportunities, our students will be able to successfully pursue whatever choice they pursue.
Yeah, and I agree, and I know we have the framework to do it. But I think from my perspective, and if anyone's watching this video and you're looking at this IPA plan, this especially this particular slide, it's heavily focused around college. And so I don't see us merging those two items together for the actual plan itself. So that's where my concern is, and my questions are really arising, because I'm fully aware that we've got the two plans. We've got the opportunity for our students to do CTE and those types of things and get certifications, but when we look at the holistic child or our holistic student, when we look at that profile of a graduate, that profile of a graduate is more than this particular plan. So even if it's something that's kind of layered on top of this, where you can see a different color code or however this fits in plan, I would like to see just as vigorous and planning around those areas as we have done with this particular plan.
Yes, ma'am. And what we can do is provide a visual for you that shows that build out across several pathways. Currently, what we've done is we've loaded in within Skyward. This year, they've allowed a way to put in a 4-year plan into a student's account. Once the student chooses that endorsement, it populates out, and those CTE courses would be seen by that student immediately. So if in 8th grade I choose to pursue that, I would see that I have to take these CTE courses starting in 9th grade to end up taking forensic science, which would also be the culminating class for that sequence if it was down that course.
Yeah. So hopefully you all understand,
Yes,
the
ma'am.
challenge that I have when we talk about career readiness, post-second. That to me includes everything in my mind, not just breaking it off one piece here and then doing another piece here. To me, that's it. That everything. And when the student goes into Naviance or wherever, they're picking, their items, and it's not separate. It's just not separate. It should be one view of it. Yeah. So thank you for listening.
I also wanted to add that there's obviously several pieces in here. In terms of the individual planning form, there may be some potential for us to add additional pieces in there so that we can really get to the heart of what they might want to do associated with a career and a CTE pathway, not necessarily just the college piece. I know that in the 8th grade, they work through a career cluster finder, if you will, and there's some specific questions that begin at that level, but we can certainly work to build that out so that there's a continuum, not necessarily just early on, but all the way through, so that those questions continue to be asked via the protocol in terms of the conversation that the counselor's having with the student. So.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Helliger. Mr. Rosenthal?
Yes, thank you. I think one way to accomplish that would maybe be to make sure that we expose kids to some of the different career opportunities. I don't know how you do that. I mean, there's always, career days and stuff like that, but that's kind of informal. Maybe formalize that a little more somehow. I think that would be helpful. And if it takes some, maybe takes away from a little student instruction every now and then, but it's worth it, because a lot of students don't know what an engineer does or what a welder does or whatever, So I think it'd be good to include that. So
Thank you for that idea, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Ms. Helliger?
Just one more thing, and thank you for sharing that as well. Because I remember last year I did junior achievement with my company, represented Centerpoint Energy at Baines Middle School, and they had a ton of parents there. To bring different kinds of careers to the children, but then at some other schools, it wasn't as many. As much participation. I don't know if that was organization or what that represented, but actually having time within our curriculum to expose our students to different types of careers, I think needs to be intentional for them. This is also another opportunity for us to partner with our community leaders as well. Around that, we've got all these companies and businesses. When Oscar does his things, he's got architects, plumbers, and all these different people. How can they give back to our community by helping us with those types of things? Yeah. So, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Helliger. Mr. Burdine?
I think that we've talked about this a few times with Mr. Rosenthal, Ms. Helliger. Just how does the CTE tie into this? Nothing needs to be said. I just wanted to say that I was thinking along those same lines. So y'all will get it figured out. And I appreciate the presentation. It's a lot of great information. And thanks for all your hard work.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Burdine. Mrs. James?
All right, thank you. And I want to echo my colleagues' comments, because how to develop that career piece, and even for the kids who may go to college at some point, some of them may need to support themselves or maybe on a long plan where they need to have a job as they go along. And in fact, most kids do have jobs at some point in their college time. So I think your concept of getting the certifications and emphasizing that's important. One of the things that dawned on me, and I asked a couple of questions about this earlier today, was the parent university. It seemed to me that was a good launching point if we're trying to expose kids and parents to different options that might be out there. And really that works on both ends of the spectrum, because it could be careers that are available in our community or jobs that are available, but it also could be college options and opportunities. And one thing that came to my mind was some kids don't realize if they start, taking algebra in 9th grade, they can proceed all the way to a pre-calculus class. If they start in 8th grade, they can take a college calculus class in high school. And some of our population may not even realize that that's an option. So those types of things of trying to educate parents and get the word out is really good. Another thing that crossed my mind is all the choices that we have in our district at the secondary level for academies and CTE programs. That so much needs to be a part, because even if they're of the parent university, and really for the students too, because if they haven't been exposed to it, or if there's not a strong program, let's say a strong ag program at their campus, they may not realize all the options and opportunities that the ag program has to offer. And so I really like your idea of starting this in the middle school and exposing parents to it. And really, it becomes a publicity tool for us, because we're offering so many choices to our community, and some of them are kind of well-kept secrets, and that's not what I don't think this leadership team is all about. We want kids to have whatever opportunities. So that's a long speech to say thanks, Addie, for saying that. I do want to bring up one other thing, though, if I can ask an actual question now.
Yes, ma'am.
I wrote it down someplace, but it has to do around these CCR advisors, College Career Readiness Advisors. So you mentioned them a little bit, but you mentioned counselors repeatedly in this process. So my recollection is when we started the CCR advisors that we were trying to release or ease the burden somewhat of the counselors to do some counseling and help identify some other things that might be going on in kids' lives that were blocking them from taking full advantage of their education opportunity. And I'm just wondering, what grade levels are the CCRs serving, and how are we handling that relationship? Or maybe you could just expand on that concept, because I'm wanting to make sure we're using our people wisely and for the right intents, and how they're trained and things like that.
Yes, ma'am. The CCR advisors will be working explicitly with the 12th graders on their plans. So as we showed here tonight, we're going from 11th grade to 11th and 12th grade student meetings. The CCR advisors will be meeting with seniors. To assist us with the 11th graders, CCR advisors will also be meeting with 11th graders, since college and career readiness advisors really hang out with those juniors and senior levels. So that's the plan with that group.
So would it be, this is just a concept, would it be more efficient if the parents were introduced to that person earlier in the process, and then they would know that's their go-to person? If they have a question about FAFSA or what's the SAT or something, then the counselor center doesn't get bogged down in those questions on those routine things that can be a go-to. And then if the CCR can't handle it, then he or she can bump it on to the counselor. But it seems that the parents need to know that that's the go-to person. If you're working on a career plan, or you want to go to be in the military, or whatever your plan forward is, I think that could ease the burden. And I would suggest even cycling that to the middle school on those 8th grade parent nights, having those high school CCRs go to the middle school and be a face that parents will see in high school. That's just an idea.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mrs. James. Mr. George.
Yeah, excuse me. Thank you for a good presentation. I have a couple of questions. You mentioned something about parent university.
Yes, sir.
And piggybacking on Ms. James was saying, it is, parents are the most important catalyst in this whole discussion. So can you please elaborate on what kind of university, where you do it, how often, any of that stuff?
Okay. The first parent university will take place. We've anchored down some dates and times this week, actually, this past week. November 8th at Austin High School is our first one, and then December 6th at Hightower will be the second one. So those are the first two that we have scheduled so far this year. At the parent university, we want to expose our parents to the game. So, and as a high school principal, I called it the game. Some of us know what the game is. We know how to apply for colleges. We know how to write an essay for a scholarship. We know what score we need for an SAT or a PSAT, why take the ACT instead of the SAT. But we want to make sure that all of our parents have that knowledge and awareness. So Parent University will be sharing what are the 5 endorsements that Texas has and which one might interest your students. We mentioned the academies already, so these are like super endorsements, I guess is the best way to put it. When to take these tests and why they matter for SAT, PSAT, ACT. What's the difference between an advanced placement course and what's a dual credit course, and why are they different? What do I need to do to take those classes? And what do I need to prepare for in middle school to be best prepared? So I could take advanced placement in high school, but if I didn't prepare through pre-AP or challenging courses through middle school, my success rate may not be as high if I didn't prepare that way. Also, some of these tests, like the PSAT has AP potential. With AP potential, we can identify students early that would probably do very well on these AP courses. And we need to share that with parents and say, when you get the PSAT, we're also going to share your AP potential report and encourage your child to take these advanced placement courses. Those are just some of the things that we'll share at Parent University, but in summary, it's to share the game and make sure that everybody has the same rules on the same playing field moving forward.
Right. And I just wanted to add there, because coming from an immigrant background, there's a lot of parents don't know all these things. I didn't know what is AP courses or pre-AP courses when I came to this country. I had no idea. So there's a lot of parents out there. So this kind of parent university can be a real informative thing for a lot of parents. And also, I hear that we have, maybe it's beyond the scope of what we are talking, but how do we start this discussion at an elementary level?
That's a very good question. We do share all of this with elementary counselors as well. They are part of the ASCA model. So every component that I presented to you tonight, they also need to deliver those components at the elementary level. What changes are the percentages. So the amount of time that as a counselor I might spend at a high school level should be 35% with direct services. Down at the elementary, it's about 5%, 10%. And theirs is more of that's working classroom curriculum with the students to build up college awareness, career awareness, those type of things.
Sure. And also, I just wanted to piggyback on Mr. Rosenthal was saying, internship opportunities, and I have seen it working in my son's case. It changed his. He had an opportunity to go to a hospital and watch an open heart surgery. It changed the way he looked at everything, and he is in med school, wanted to be a cardiologist kind of thing. So I hear stories like that from other students also. So I think that might be, and I know we have limitation on that, but we should focus on that also, in my opinion. So yeah, but overall, I mean, I'm glad we are seriously talking about it. If you talk to community colleges, I see that, they will tell you they have college readiness classes at community college level. And there, if you really think about it, the student have to pay for those classes, which they have been already acquired that skill before they got there. So I'm glad we are discussing this in a well thought out way, and so it is going to be benefiting our students. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. George. Thank you, Mr. Byrne, for being here.
So much.
Thank you, Ms. Saavedra, as well. Next up is our 2017-18 budget update. Dr.
Yes,
Dupree.
ma'am. This next report is going to be presented by Steve and Brian, our budget officer, Brian Gwynn. The focus of the report is going to be to share an update on how we're working to address the gap in the 17-18 budget, as well as planning out for the 18-19 and beyond. So I'll turn it over to Steve.
Thank you, sir. Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Dupree. We do have our budget update. We are a month late. Harvey put us behind a little bit, but I think we've caught up, and I think you'll agree with me after you see what Brian has in store. So I'll turn it over to Brian and see if he has a Latin lesson for us.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Dupree. This evening would like to present to you some information on the 2017-18 budget. The last action that you took on the budget was back in September when the tax rate was approved. Since that time, we have had some eventful months, of the least of which included the wrath of a hurricane. So we are pleased to be before you this evening. Through all that, we have maintained the focus on addressing the budget gap that was adopted in the 2017-18 budget, and would like to provide you with an update on our efforts to this point. Before I discuss those efforts that are currently underway, I would like to provide a bit of the background. Back in the June timeframe, the budget was adopted for 2017-18, and that did include approximately a $12 million deficit. However, when we adopted that deficit, we did make the plans to utilize designated fund balance from economic stabilization funds to cover that shortfall, and that was deliberately set aside and made available during that process. At the time, a tax rate swap was also discussed, and that was approved in September. That did two things. One, it provided tax relief to taxpayers, and it also increased recurring revenues in the general fund from both the state as well as local property taxes. And then finally, we are currently engaged in an organization-wide effort to generate ideas to close the budget gap for 2018-19. Some of those I will discuss with you this evening. So unfortunately, we do not live in a static world, and as a result of that, we have had some unforeseen items that came our way during this process. The first one I believe you're aware of is the mold remediation efforts at Willow Ridge High School, and we're having to use 2014 bond contingency funds to cover that. The second is what is called, I believe in Latin, tempestatis financialis horribilis, which is basically it's a bad financial situation for us. In that event with Hurricane Harvey, we had 66 facilities that were damaged, of which we have major repairs that are going to be happening at Juan Seguin, and it has not in fact reopened and will not until next school year. We're in the process of working with our insurance company, as well as we've had initial conversation with FEMA, and I will say that the FEMA reimbursement process can take several years. It's not something that we'll receive those reimbursements next week, and during that time we will have to bridge that gap with the use of the general fund balance. So until we receive those reimbursements from FEMA, it could be, we would be relying on our own funds to do that. And then lastly, we have the unknown unknowns. As much as we would like to say nothing is going to change from this point forward, there will likely be events or things that happen between now and the next budget year where we have to make unforeseen adjustments to our budget. And we just want to point out, as much as we'd like to say we are finished with everything bad happening this year, we don't know what's going to happen next. We have made some initial ideas that have come forward that will have an immediate impact on 17-18, and although we're not quite ready to quantify the dollar amounts associated with those, I would like to point out what some of those are. That includes energy conservation ideas, balancing our teaching staff between campuses as opposed to adding new staff immediately to make sure that we maintain our staffing ratios. Our efforts on SHARs have continued to go forward. Our free and reduced enrollment efforts have been an ongoing effort and have been successful. And then we've also made efforts to scrub vacant positions. So rather than immediately hiring for new positions, we're asking the questions, does this position need to be filled before it moves forward? And then finally, daily efficiencies. And what I mean by that is we're asking the questions before we do training and traveling. Is it something that can be done locally? Is it something where we can have someone go to the training, come back and train the trainers? And then lastly, rather than having a meal at every meeting when we bring in people from across the district, is that something that we can avoid? So, or if not avoid, are we using our internal catering as opposed to going out to Jason's or some of those other sites? So these are efforts that are currently underway that we hope will begin to generate savings that will carry into next year and beyond. So there are a number of steps that we've gone through, or that we will go through. The first objective that we have in mind is to have an organizational-wide effort that is methodical to close the budget gap. So we don't want to take any knee-jerk reactions to just immediately begin stopping spending. Part of doing that involves engaging our stakeholder groups, and I'll cover who those are in just a moment, assigning cost estimates when we come up with the ideas that we're going to go through or utilize, prioritizing those ideas with those same stakeholder groups, engaging the community to review the prioritized ideas, And then finally, bringing the recommendations forward to the board and incorporating those into the 18-19 budget. So this is the process that we have engaged, and where we are on that is we've gone through the initial idea generation stage. So we met with our leadership town hall, and that includes principals, assistant principals, directors, the assistant superintendents, and all of the E-team. So those groups were all a part of this meeting, and during that meeting, we generated a list of ideas that could begin saving money in 18-19. This was facilitated by Dr. Dupree, so he was the one leading the discussion, so it doesn't appear that it's a business and finance of we have to cut the budget. This is more of an organizational effort that it's important to realize it's coming from the top down. During that meeting, he did mention that there are no such thing as bad ideas. So some of the ideas that will come forward for these groups to consider will be eye-opening because there were no bad ideas. Everything made it onto the list. Through that process, there were about 450 unique ideas generated. And there were probably about 700 ideas on the list, but there was a lot of ideas that were similar between the groups. So through that process has been completed, and at this point we're in the process of estimating costs on those, and we're probably about 3/4 of the way through that process. There's still some that need cost estimates attached to them, but a lot of the heavy lifting has been done with those two groups. The next are some of the samples of ideas that came up through this is evaluating staffing ratios, bell schedule changes, consolidating bilingual campuses, increasing revenue generating programs such as Club Excel and Success Zone. And again, these are ideas. It's not that these are solidified and these will be the ones that are ultimately brought forward. This is just a sample, if you will, of some of those ideas that have come forward. As we go through the decision-making process and prioritization process with those groups, they will be the ones who ultimately decide what the superintendent brings forward for final consideration and inclusion in the budget. So our next steps and timelines through this process, during the months of November and December, the idea prioritization process will happen with the leadership town hall as well as the BCC, and we'll also share what has come forward and get feedback from the teacher forum as well. In January, we anticipate that we will engage in the community engagement component of this, and currently all campuses have what is called a campus-based leadership team that's made up of parents from that area as well as business leaders. We'll begin to call upon some of those folks so that they can come forward and provide some feedback on the ideas that are being generated and prioritized by these groups. And then finally, in the February timeframe, we should be able to come back to you and provide you an update on what has been accomplished to that point. And then in the March and April timeframe, of course, we'll begin the process of implementing these ideas and incorporating them into the budget that we bring forward for your ultimate approval. And that concludes the presentation. At this point, we'll be happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Thank you, Mr. Gwynn. We appreciate your presentation. Do we have questions from the trustees? Mrs. James.
Yes, thank you very much for that report, and thank you for sharing. So just a quick review, back at when you were giving the background, we're using $12 million of the Economic Stabilization Fund. Is that right for this?
Correct.
That's our estimate for this budget balancing. And then, well, that's from the initial budget, but obviously we're going to have some budget changes because of the hurricane repairs and the mold remediation. So what is the amount of that we're talking about?
Well, two components. With the mold remediation efforts, that will be paid for or funded out of the 2014 bond contingency, so that won't impact this. As far as the hurricane expenditures, we're still getting final estimates on that. I believe the number that we provided to the state was about 15 million, I believe. So we anticipate a lot of that will be covered by insurance, and then what is not reimbursed immediately by FEMA, we would be bridging that money with the general fund balance. So we have funds set aside that could do that, but unfortunately in the short term, we will be carrying that load until we receive those reimbursements.
So from an accounting perspective, those amounts, if we think that we'll get reimbursement from FEMA, those will actually be booked as receivables. Okay. So that's where it'll end up on the balance sheet as opposed to hitting fund balance.
Okay, so thank you. So I was just trying to get an estimate or an understanding, I suppose, of the impact on the operating budget. So really neither of these things at this point, you will have those two things, the hurricane and the mold remediation, are not expected to have an impact on this year's operating budget.
That's correct.
Okay. We'll be using our savings account for that.
Right.
All right. And then I had another question. You talked a lot about, I'm thumbing through here, but you talked about the folks involved in generating the budget gap closing ideas, and I didn't hear a lot of campus staff or teachers or administrative assistants, those types of folks. I see BCC up there, so maybe some of those people were involved, or?
That is correct. So in the BCC, the Budget and Compensation Committee, that is made up of a cross-section of members from the organization. That includes teachers, assistant principals, directors, executive assistants, as well as basically some line level staff are included in that. That group is, I believe, about 120 members total. And then I also mentioned we will be taking it to the teacher forum as well for feedback, which of course is all teachers.
Okay, well, I think that seems wise, because if this is going to be an organizational-wide event, if you will, the more ground floor folks we have knowledgeable of the issue early on in the process that can give input, then it seems like that'll be the wisest. Plus, you might get some interesting ideas from folks that are, say, working in the front office of a school or something like that. So thanks for putting all the effort into it and working on finding some solutions for us. Do we have any, and I know this is a little bit premature, but do we have a preliminary number on our gap that we estimate for 18-19?
So without an employee merit pool, it would stay essentially the same at about $12 million, because we do have some additional growth from property tax that we're building in, roughly 5% growth.
Okay.
So we're anticipating that it would remain the same at 12 million with no changes to employee compensation. If you factor in employee compensation at 2%, it grows to about $20 million.
Okay, so that's, thank you. That's what I was wondering. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. James. That was actually my question, so thanks for answering that. What is the gap? So, okay, I think that is all. Thank you very much. Next up, information item, the emergency declaration purchase update. Dr. Dupree.
All right, our Chief Operating Officer, Oscar Perez, is going to provide a brief update. Oscar?
Yes, ma'am. Since our last report at the September 18th board meeting, we've executed one of the major contracts with...
Do you mind pulling your microphone a little bit closer, please, sir?
I can, sorry.
Thank you.
So what I was saying was, since our last report on September the 18th, we've executed one of the major contracts, which is with Alamo One, who provided the remediation at all of the campuses that required remediation. And so that one is already in place and executed. We're continuing to work on the remaining contracts and hope to get those ready before we come back to you at the next board meeting. The other part of this is that we also identified 4 contractors / vendors that were not reported the last time but had done some work. So we've gone ahead and added them to this list. And those are ETS, which provided elevator repair. Their Intex Flooring provided carpet, PTI provided playground mulch, and Texas Walkway and Canopy provided canopy repair. So those are incorporated into this report. And then also our Small Business Enterprise Program Coordinator has verified that 4 out of the 26 contractors, vendors that provided services have SBE status. And then also, as we're finalizing these contracts and we're looking at all the invoices and everything, we've been able to go ahead and refine the estimate to actual, and we've decreased the amount by $145,000. So we hope, as we come back to you, that we'll also tighten those numbers in the next month.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. Thanks for the update. Do we have questions from the trustees? Mrs. James.
Is there, how much work is ongoing? What work is ongoing?
The,
Besides Seguin, Seguin is, and then is everything else fixed?
correct. Seguin is the one that's, hanging out there that's going to go on for the remainder of this year and into next year.
You mean calendar year, not school year, correct?
Yeah, calendar year, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So Seguin is ongoing, but the rest of the campuses, at the rest of our buildings, the work is all completed?
All of the remediation work is completed. There's still some restoration work that's going on, but it's nothing major at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. James. Okay, thank you, Mr. Perez. Appreciate it. We are now going to convene in closed session under the Texas Open Meetings Act, Government Code, Chapter 551, and the sections listed in the agenda, and for the purpose of a private consultation with the board's attorney on any or all subjects or matters authorized by law. We are now convened in closed session.